Hey church family, welcome to this week's Word of Encouragement. I wanted to wait until the last day of the year to do this week's Word of Encouragement, and that is today. Today is December 31, 2020. And the word of encouragement for this week is all things. All things. There's a verse in Romans chapter 8. You might remember it. It goes like this. It says, and we know, we might forget, we need to be reminded, and we know that in all things, we know that in all things God works. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Boy, in 2020, we've seen all things. We've seen good things. We've seen bad things. We've seen unexplainable things. We've seen the pandemic. We've seen the loss of so many lives. We've seen so many different kinds of injustice. When it comes to the government, we've seen all things. When it comes to politics, we've seen all things. When it comes to the election, we've seen all things. There's so much lack of unity in our country right now, and so much unrest and so much chaos. There's so many things, and we need to be reminded that we know that in all things, all of these things, God works. It reminds me of two characters in the Bible. The first is Joseph. You might remember Joseph in Genesis. He had a lot of brothers, and his brothers didn't think real highly of him. In fact, his brothers hated him. His brothers sold him into slavery. They threw him down into a pit for a while, and they told Dad he was dead, and they sold him into slavery. And when he was in slavery, he was accused of some wrong things, some false things. He was thrown into prison. He had a lot of things. All things happened to him. And yet we read in Genesis chapter 50, he says to his brothers, Joseph says to his brothers, what you meant to harm me, God intended it for good. God uses all things for good. Even the bad stuff. Even the bad stuff in Joseph's life, God uses all things. And then there's a character in John chapter 11. His name was Lazarus. And Lazarus got sick, and Lazarus died. And Jesus said, this sickness is not going to end in death. He says this sickness, God is going to use this sickness for His glory. God is going to use all things, even sickness, even death. So 2020 has been an interesting year for all of us. You've seen all things at work, all things at home, all things when it comes to schools, all things when it comes to the government. We have all seen all things, and we need to remember, because we know that in all things, God can use all of these things, and God does use all of these things for good, for His glory, for those who love Him. So as 2020 comes to an end, I hope you remember, because we know that in all things, God works. And as we look at 2021, I hope you have a blessed year, as God is going to use all things, continue to use all things for His glory in your life. I hope you have a blessed week.